Hey everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Power Slam podcast here on itrwrestling.com or wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Kenny McIntosh, and it's so humid in Glasgow, I feel like I'm going through menopause. But I'm joined today by a man. He's too young to go through menopause, and also he's a man. It is my friend, my mentor, Mr. Finley Martin. Finn, how humid is it down there today?
It's actually rather pleasant here in Lancaster, Lancashire. People say it's grim up north. I say the north is glorious.
There you go. I mean, your hair looks glorious today. Look at that. Look at the volume on that hair.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I washed it just, special for the podcast. That's my level of commitment to this podcast.
There you go. Well, listen, there's so much to get into in wrestling. I mean, let's dive in first with a story that kind of intrigued me. It was Jim Ross talking about Lex Luger, and he said that of all the people that Vince McMahon has worked on and tried to get over, Lex was the hardest. I'm going to read this blurb from that JR said on his podcast about Lex Luger. So he said the promotional manifestations, the Lex Express, the USS Intrepid, Yokozuna, all those things were major elements in trying to establish Lex as something very, very special. Vince really worked his ass off to accomplish those things. I don't think we can blame Vince for Lex not getting over to the level perceived for him to become, because Vince did everything he could do. Somewhere along the way, you have to connect with your audience, and there's no timeline for that. Some guys connect right away, and some guys connect years later. So I think that's where I stood in that deal. I think we could have done a better job introducing him, but I know the effort was there, and that was just the first phase of the narcissist. He got promoted well, and I can tell you he got promoted well and expensively. And he does go on to say, actually, that he doesn't think that Vince tried any harder to get anybody over than he did with Lex Luger. So I thought that was an interesting conversation to bring up. Do you think Lex is the one that Vince has tried the hardest to make a main event star? And if not, who do you think the real person is?
Well, I mean, I agree with Jim Ross there. I will just say the name that came to mind when you were talking about how long it takes some people get over quickly, some people don't, would be Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who joined WWF in 95. And he was seen as a bit of a lost cause by like 97. And it wasn't really until 98 with DX, when he took over when Shawn Michaels retired for what would it have been, second time? Was the Losing His Smile episode, was that an official retirement? I'm not sure if that was an official retirement or whether it was the second. Well, whatever. When he took over in 98, that to me was when Hunter Hearst Helmsley became a star. So it took him nearly 3 years. And 95, 96, he was really struggling. As for Luger, yes, I agree with Jim Ross. WWF put a lot of money into that thing, into Luger. He came in as, I believe he was originally known as Narcissus, wasn't it? Royal Rumble 93.
Yeah.
I think that was the nickname, Narcissus, not the narcissist.
Yeah, no, because he had initially done the WBF stuff in 92 because he contractually couldn't wrestle yet for WBF. Then he debuted as the Narcissist at Rumble 93, and then he was just kind of working after WrestleMania in the mid-card, and then all of a sudden he turns up on July 4th. On the USS Intrepid, Finn.
Yes.
One of my favorite angles when he comes out and he's wearing the exact same USA print top that Todd Pettingill's wearing. So you know you're cool if you're wearing the same clobber as Big Todd.
Oh yes. I mean, it was an amazing angle for the time, but I mean, I think part of the problem, I didn't think a lot of people think Yokozuna was this amazing heel. And okay, he was huge and he was a villain and everything, and he was champion for a long time. But I never really thought that Yokozuna was that effective as a heel. I mean, he was the best they had at the time, I accept that. But I mean, Luger just wasn't likable as a babyface. That was his problem. I mean, he wasn't particularly over as a heel. As we saw, he came in at Royal Rumble 93, surrounded by all the mirrors, doing the flexing. He was in really good shape, even though they were testing for steroids at the time. We did an interview with Luger in Power Slam back in 2013, and he swore blind that he wasn't using at the time, and he did look clean, but he was in great shape. Obviously, he liked the gimmick where he was, flexing and looking in the mirror, but it just didn't really click as a heel. I think his style was sort of all wrong for WWF. I don't think he really wanted to go all out to improve either. And I always found it weird, really, because if you go back to 89, he had a really good run with Ricky Steamboat, mid 89. Had some tremendous matches with Flair as a babyface and as a heel. So he had proven, and also remember the famous Super Bowl 91 match with the Steiners, Sting and Luger versus the Steiners, one of the best matches on pay-per-view that year. So he had proven that he could have good matches. But when he arrived in WWF, it just didn't happen. I mean, it's very hard from his entire run, which lasted, what was it, just over 2.5 years, wasn't it? It was like Jan 93 to August 95. So just over 2.5 years.
Yes.
It's very hard to name a match that Luger had in that period that you would want to watch twice. Really difficult.
Yeah, I can't think of one. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I often thought that part of the reason that the Luger experiment, because the Triple H one's really interesting, you mentioned that, because Triple H, because he was a heel, he could kind of get away with staying under the radar for a long time. Whereas with Lex, it was like, you're the new Hogan. We're going to put you in that position. We're going to make you Mr. America, essentially. So it was like he was like a Hogan tribute act in some ways, the way we booked him. So I just don't think he could have. I don't think no matter what he had done, I don't think he could have won in that position. But you are right as well. You know, he never clicked in WWF for that 2.5 years. You know, because I mean, I even the first Nitro I ever watched was in August of '97 when my mom. You remember that I've told you the Sky story about the guy who died upstairs.
Yeah.
But when we finally got to Erskine and my mum bought Sky, the first Nitro I watched was August '97 when Luger torture racked Hogan and won the title. And I mean, when you look at that,
it was so over, wasn't it? But that was partly because Hogan was so effective as a heel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, to contrast that with the WWF Luger, who just wasn't that over at all and didn't have any good matches. So it just didn't click for him. But I think it was also hard because when you bring him in as the narcissist and he's a heel for 5 months, and then the way that he turns babyface is that he's all of a sudden, you know, going to stand up for America. Like, that was a bit of a you know, tenuous link that they tried to bring up there. And and then of course he wrestles Yokozuna at SummerSlam and he wins by count out, and then he celebrates like he's won the title. I mean, it's up there with like Randy Savage trying to pin Yokozuna in the 1993 Royal Rumble to win the match. It's ludicrous. It's just bonkers. So poor Lex.
I mean, I never understood it. I mean, everyone at the time thought that Luger was going to win the title. And it did seem, you know, the Lex Express bus tour, I can't remember how many cities he went round. But I mean, you know, there was a lot of time and effort and expense went into that, obviously, as JR said. And for him then to fail to defeat Yokozuna for the title just felt like, you know, they lost faith in him. You know, in the big match, it was as if, we're building our hopes up, and Luger's our man. You know, he's going to win the belt for America, and then, you know, this, you know, evil foreign menace villain has retained the belt. But we're going to pretend that he won the title even though he didn't. And the whole thing that was how it was supposed to play out. And that's the other baffling thing about it, was the idea was, of course, Yokozuna would retain. Then they would do the double, you know, the Luger and Bret Hart going over the top rope at the same time, co-winners of the Royal Rumble, and then both would face Yokozuna at WrestleMania. But if you go back and look at the Royal Rumble 94 finish, it's fairly obvious that Bret Hart is the more popular of the two performers. So it was Bret who got the nod, and he was the one who dethroned Yokozuna, and rightly so as well. And I think at that point, Luger knew it was over, and he was destined to spend the rest of his WWF career in the mid-card, which is precisely what happened. I mean, the team with Davey Boy Smith, the Allied Powers, was okay, but it's kind of a mid-level team. I just kind of also felt that with Luger, it did seem like he was going through the motions there. If you go back and look at some of his matches in Crockett Promotions and in WCW, it was a different wrestler. And it was like he had something to prove. And by the time he got to WWF, it was as if, well, I've proven myself. You know, I can just, you know, I can just do the basics. And my God, do you remember that feud he had with Crush? I mean, it just never seemed to end. It was just the most boring feud of the year. It just went on and on. And then a feud with Tatanka. Remember that one? That was equally tedious. So yeah.
Poor Lex. Well, let's move on. I did want to give a quick shout out to the Patriot, Dale Wilkes, who sadly passed away last week. The Patriot, who I guess if you're a sort of WWF fan or whatever, you'll remember his run in '97, that odd run that he had, during the Team Canada, Austin, Shawn Michaels kind of stuff. But he also wrestled in Japan. He was in WCW. What do you think the kind of legacy is of the Patriot's career? Because he kind of did go everywhere in the '90s, and he was pretty good.
Yeah.
What's the legacy of the Patriot, do you think?
I think his best work or his most success, of course, was 92 to 97 in All Japan. That was not continuous. He had that 94 to 95 run in WCW with Marcus Bagwell in the Stars and Stripes tag team. I mean, they were, decent team, flag waving, patriotic. To me, he was in great shape, very muscular guy. Really tall. I mean, in a way, perfect for that era. Actually, probably would have been better. I mean, he did make his debut in the late 80s. First came to notice as the Trooper in the dying days of the AWA. I know he worked for other companies as well, but I mean, he was a good, solid hand in the ring. I don't think he was really exceptional in any way. He was more of remembered really as a tag team wrestler, and he did do some really good stuff in All Japan. But nothing sort of exceptional, nothing outstanding. He was more of a mid-level player, teamed with the Eagle. Johnny Ace actually had decent team with Johnny Ace, who lots of people mock him, but he had a good run in All Japan, no doubt about that. So he came over to WWF in 1997. But he was only there for maybe, what would it be, about 4 months or something like that. And then he suffered, I think it was a triceps tear, devastating muscle injury. And he had various other injuries as well and just wasn't able to make a comeback. I think WWF wanted him to return, but he just wasn't in any condition to do so. And then, due to the injuries and various other things, he ended up with a chronic addiction to painkillers. And ended up spending time in prison in 2002, 2003 for forging prescriptions, but got clean inside and came out and lived a productive life for, from 2003 onwards. I think he'd been in rehab a few times before he ended up going to jail. He'd had a succession of arrests, about 20 arrests or something ridiculous. So, I mean, for him, going to jail actually was an opportunity to distance himself from the drugs. And to rid himself of that addiction, which he was able to do. But in the ring, he was more like a mid-level player. Good hand. I think he was well liked and respected by the talent. Not a top guy, but let's face it, most people aren't. And I think if he'd come along 5 years before he did, I think he would have done really well in the 80s, particularly in WWF.
Yeah, for sure. It's worth watching some of that '97 stuff because he's kind of a weird. He's just plonked into this situation where he's the American guy in a mask, and every 2 weeks they're in Canada, and he's got to work heel one night, and he's got to work babyface the next, and it's a bit all over the place. And it's all these realistic characters, and then you get this American guy with a mask on. So.
Yeah, it's kind of felt quite dated, and it seemed to be a bit of a fish out of water with that character in that environment. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe he would have turned heel, and maybe he could have done something quite interesting with that character during the Attitude Era had he not suffered the muscle injury. But I mean, he could have Sorry, Kenny.
And you go. He teamed with Mr. America, Hulk Hogan in 2003. They could have formed some sort of epic masked tag team fighting for America. I'd have loved it.
I mean, but what would Kurt Angle have done for music? Because, of course, the Patriot was the first one to have that entrance tune. I mean? But
you got to have a feud over the tune. Whoever wins gets the entrance theme. Mr. America would come out there with Zach Gowen in his one leg, fighting to get the tune back. Just book it. It's great.
We all missed out there, didn't we, Kenny?
We did. But yeah, go and check out some of the Patriot stuff on the network and the All Japan stuff on YouTube. I do also want to give a quick shout out to Terry Funk, obviously, who has been kind of announced that he's sadly going through dementia. Don Morocco had said in his podcast that Funk's dealing with dementia and is now staying in an assisted living facility in his hometown of Amarillo, Texas. And then Mike Johnston, PW Insider, confirmed the news and noted that he's been dealing with health issues for some time, that things have deteriorated since the passing of his wife, Vicky, in March 2019. I did see a kind of funny, lighthearted thing where Tommy Dreamer said that he was on the phone to him last night, and Terry Funk's been kind of tickled pink by all the reaction that he's got and is wondering if he can somehow work all the buzz that he's created into an angle, which is kind of the story of Terry Funk's career, that he still...
For another comeback, right? Another payday.
For another comeback, of course. But, I mean, Terry Funk is because the first time I ever saw him was when he came into WWF in 97, 98 as Chainsaw Charlie. And then obviously I watched more stuff back and afterwards. But I mean, he's been around so many eras. He's done so many different things. I mean, Terry Funk has got. I almost feel like he's underrated because people don't talk about him as much as maybe they should, because he's more than just a guy who falls into barbed wire and sets himself on fire.
Oh, absolutely. One of the greatest ever. I mean, back in 2013, I did an article in the magazine called The 10 Greatest US Style All-Rounders of all Time. And Terry Funk was on the list. Of course he was. Now, there's a guy, never mind Madonna or Chris Jericho. There's somebody who was the master of reinvention, certainly in pro wrestling. And you go back and look, he started in the 60s, just went to all the different territories, was a guy that in many ways was most memorable for his runs as a heel, but was an amazing babyface as well when it came to sympathy seeking. We talked about this on the podcast the other week when Riddle, actually it was last week, wasn't it? Riddle suffered the injury in the match on Raw. And then he goes backstage and gets bandaged up, and then he comes back out, the heroic comeback. That's the Terry Funk spot. That is the thing that he was renowned for in the All Japan Real World Tag League tournament. And just so many stellar, outstanding moments in his career, whether it was NWA World Champion, whether it was, the feud with Dusty down in Florida, the matches with Lawler in Memphis. I mean, they were still doing business as late as 1989. The famous All Japan retirement in 83, I think it was, which did unbelievable business up until his retirement there. He was the most popular foreign wrestler there, teaming with his brother, of course. The incredible Real World Tag League tournament finals and contributions the Funk brothers made to that tournament, the success of that tournament, which was for a time the biggest tag team tournament in pro wrestling. They're a huge part of that. Then, after he brought the retirement, and Vow, of course, made the comeback, actually had a run in WWF in 85, 86, which a lot of people forget about. Actually had a match with Hulk Hogan on Saturday night's main event, which I watched recently. Really entertaining match, actually. Funk worked so well with Hogan. It was kind of maybe a little bit comical for it to be a pay-per-view main event, but really perfect for that scenario that it was in. Then, he had a run in the acting biz. Obviously he was in Paradise Alley with Sylvester Stallone, the wrestling movie I think it was about 78 that came out, 79, which was I don't know whether it was Stallone's first movie after he won the Oscar for Rocky, but it was a movie that was expected to do a lot better than it did. I don't think it actually did that well, but he had a huge role in it, and lots of other wrestlers were in that film as well. So, he was in Roadhouse and various other films. Then returned to action in WCW, one of the most amazing sneak attacks in wrestling history on Ric Flair after Flair had beaten Ricky Steamboat at, I think it was Music City Showdown. It was the May 1989 WCW pay-per-view. And Funk had been one of the judges at ringside, and he came in. It's just an amazing angle where, Flair's there. He's a baby face. He's saying to Funk, I'm not saying, Funk's saying, well, I'd like to challenge you for that belt. And Flair's there saying, well, hold on a minute. You're not in the top 10. You're not in the WCW top 10. And that's what I'm looking at. Funk's like, so you're saying I'm not good enough, aren't you, Rick? And Flair's like, well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. And then Funk's like, well, put it there. Let me just want to say I shook hands with with the world champion, and then drills Flair, does the pile driver on the table. People think like Flair's really suffered a broken neck. Flair like sells it for weeks, takes like a load of time off in the run up to their big grudge match at the Great American Bash 1989, which was, I think, the biggest money show in WCW history at that point. I mean, I know WCW was still a fairly new company in July of 89, but it ended up doing like a really good buy rate. Incredible match, amazing feud. And I've got to say, Flair Funk, the Clash match they had in November, the I Quit match, Clash New York Knockout, one of probably the best match that year, certainly in America. Absolutely outstanding. If you haven't seen that match, watch it today. And that's like 89, 90. And he retired then.
And there's so much that he's done.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge part of the success of ECW. Amazing run with FMW. Had the match with Anita in '93 that drew just over 40,000, I think it drew. And like tremendous run in Japan, doing stuff in ECW and just, and then, as you said, the run in WWF, which was like just came from out of nowhere. And he's like a star again. And, carried on working up until, I don't know, I can't remember when his last match was, up until a few years ago, wasn't it? Just almost ageless for a decade.
You're also forgetting.
Sorry.
One of his greatest accomplishments he ever had, you should look it on YouTube if you've not checked out, everybody, is his album. And my favorite song on his album is Barbra Streisand's Nose, where he sings about a woman that he sees in a bar, and he recognized her because she had Barbra Streisand's nose. And I don't think you could get away with that song today, but it is so bad that it's worth a listen. And there's him on the cover, trying to be like Garth Brooks or whatever, and he's got the Stetson on, and he's, I think he's a country music star. I mean, which is classic. It's great. So our thoughts are with Terry Funk, of course, and hopefully he is, getting taken care of where he is in his place, and I'm glad to hear he's doing okay given circumstances.
Just one more thing about Terry Funk. I interviewed him for the first time in 1995, and I said to him at the end of the interview, "Would you like me to send you a copy of the magazine?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, can I have your address?" And he really did live at the Double Cross Ranch.
No, did he really?
Yeah, I thought that's got to be a gimmick. There's no way they would say the Double Cross Ranch in, I think it was actually Canyon, Texas, not Amarillo, Texas. And I thought that's going to be a made up name. That can't be real. But that's what the ranch was. The ranch really was called the Double Cross Ranch.
What, living the gimmick. Well, listen, you mentioned that Terry Funk turning on Ric Flair was one of the big sneak attacks in wrestling. But for a historical thing this week, I do want to bring up, the greatest heel turn of all time, when Hulk Hogan comes out as the third man. Bobby Heenan tries to ruin it, but luckily it doesn't happen. And he comes out, he drops the leg on the baby faces, and he turns on the fans. I know this is your favorite heel turn ever. I mean, let's talk about it. What did you think when you saw it happen? And is it fair to say this was quite a big risk for Hogan, right? Because even though he was stale, you don't know if people are going to buy it. You don't know if people are going to like it. He could have, and even Bischoff said in an interview yesterday or in his podcast that, Hogan was quite trepidatious about it. He wasn't completely gung-ho right up until he did it. And then it ended up kind of giving him a renaissance and giving him another career.
Yeah, quite right. I mean, it was. Who was going to be the third man? And there was a lot of speculation about who it would be. Who would be Scott Hall and Kevin Nash's partner in the big 6-man main event of Bash at the Beach 1996, which took place on July 7th, 1996, 25 years ago today. And a lot of people were thinking it was going to be Lex Luger, that somebody well, somebody kind of obvious, like Lugas. He'd been heel many times. A lot of people thought it would be him. I don't know if someone must have speculated that it might be Hogan, although I don't remember that being, I don't remember many people thinking that it would be Hogan. And obviously, you know, Bischoff spoke to him about it. Hogan was given first refusal. And he was very worried. Bear in mind, Ken, he'd been a babyface for, I think it was 15 years in the USA. He'd had that little sort of dalliance with turning heel when he wore the black attire for the match with the Giant, Halloween Havoc 1995. Yes. But it wasn't a proper heel turn. It was just, I'm not really sure what he was doing there. I think he recognized that the red and yellow was growing stale, that it was seen as, you know, very dated, and that he had to do something different. But at that point, he wasn't ready to do the full-on heel turn. And it wouldn't have made any sense anyway, because the Giant was obviously a heel, and that match was going to work far better with the Giant, the bigger man, as the villain, and Hogan as the hero. I mean, as far as Bash of the Beach 1996 went, I mean, I couldn't believe it when I heard about it. I was just like, wow, this is massive. Hogan's done this. And, you know, this was before, I didn't have the internet at this point. I think I got the internet in 97. And even if I did, it would have been dial-up. So there's no way you could have, you know, watched clips from this promo. You know, it just would have been impossible in 1996. So it was described to me over the phone by people. Oh, you just no one believe what he said. He's told the fans, you fans can stick it, brother. You know, people were just like stunned that he'd gone through with this. And we've talked about this before, and I always said I thought Gene Okerlund was a huge part of the success of his post-heel turn promo. I mean, Gene was indignant. You know, he was there, what are you doing? You know, I've known you since the AWA days. How, you know, what's going through your mind to associate yourself with this man Nash and this man Hall? And like Hogan's there, just like unrepentant, like growling. Everything he said, he said it with purpose and with meaning, and as if everything he said he believed. And I think a lot of it did feel like it came from the heart, you know, especially the section where he's talking about, I did everything for the kids, I did everything for the charities, and the reception. When I came out here, obviously fans had been booing him, and he says, you fans can stick it, brother. You know, and it was just, and that was settled by Gene Okerlund. Look at all this crap in the ring, because people are bombarding the ring. They're like, you know, like paper cups and bottles, plastic bottles, not glass bottles, happily. People are bombarding the ring with rubbish, with debris, you know, all this crap in the ring, you know, that represents your future. You know, if you continue to associate yourself with these two men. And Hogan's like, as far as I'm concerned, all this crap in the ring represents the fans. And Hogan's just magnificent. He's just there. He's taking his time. He's pausing for a reaction after every statement that he makes. And another little thing that he does where Gene's holding the mic and he keeps lifting the mic up. And it's just a little sort of heelish touch that he does. And to me, it was, you know, I hope that something in my lifetime tops that, but I mean, I don't know whether it will. You know, what did you think, Trick?
Well, I was going before I say what I thought, I was going to ask you, because how in 1996, how long would it have been from it happening to you getting a tape of it? Like how long did you have to wait to kind of be able to watch a tape from the States of it?
Well, somebody would have taped it on VHS and sent it to me on via Federal Express. So I actually could have had it the following Wednesday, because it was a 2-day service on FedEx back in those days from USA to UK. So I could have seen it on the Wednesday night. It took place on the Sunday. I could have seen it on the Wednesday night, but I couldn't. I don't think I did receive it that soon after the event, but it probably was within a week of the show happening. So it's quite.
It's bizarre to think about. It's bizarre to think about. You know, you can't even read. You know, the speech that he said. You've kind of got to. You can't see photos of it. You've got to just wait and sort of imagine in your head for a couple of days how it how it played out. So it's a different time.
I couldn't, because I don't think I went online until mid '97. I did know people who were online, and I knew people who had been online since about '91. So on some message boards somewhere, there would have probably been a still of it, and maybe someone would have transcribed it. And maybe somebody would have faxed that to me. Remember fax machines, Kenny?
That's before my time, Finn, unfortunately. Faxes and pagers, all the good stuff. But no, I remember
but that's the way it was then, and that's how you got your information. You got your VHS tape through via FedEx, a great expense, of course. And maybe someone sent me through a transcript on a fax machine. I can't remember, but that would have been the easiest way to get the actual transcript word for word of his promo, for someone to actually write it out and fax it to you.
Well, because I didn't even know that he'd turned heel, because I wasn't watching WCW. We didn't have Sky at the time, so it was only really when I started buying Power Slam in like the December or January, whenever that Sid cover came out, that I would have known that it had happened. So I would have read it that he was a bad guy, and I think it must have been a couple of years before I even got to see the actual promo. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
I now I paid a lot of money on eBay to get that, so I've got that particular issue.
Issue 26, and there's and here's the feature. It's heel Hogan, like a 2-page story on the Hulkster.
Look at that.
So
does it say £1.99 in the front of that? £1.99 for those Power Slams.
£1.99. That's right.
Those are the days. But it's an amazing heel turn. And if you're somebody who, all joking aside, if you're somebody who doesn't enjoy Hogan as a person, I get it, but it is worth watching the turn. Just go to the Bash at Beach 96 in the network, scroll to the end of that main event, and watch him come out and cut that promo. And it's great. I remember thinking years ago that maybe Cena, if he had turned heel, would have been the modern version of it, but it just went on too long and that never happened. But so that this one still just stands still as kind of, I can't think of a better heel turn.
Yeah, to me, it's like, I watched it again today. It's like spine tingling. And kind of an emotional thing watching it. I kind of get quite moved by that speech, because it's like, it's like somebody who's like a film aficionado watching like a Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire or The Godfather or something. Like, almost like Godfather actually would be a perfect analogy. Brando's seen as washed up, after his amazing performances in the 50s, and on the waterfront and films like that, and then kind of gets lost in the 60s and has that amazing comeback in The Godfather in '72, I think it was released, won the Oscar for it, and just this incredible sort of comeback performance. And for me, it was that good by Hogan. And just, I think you really need to know the story of what was going on. You need to read about it to really grasp the enormity of that heel turn. So I would actually suggest you do a little bit of reading up first before you watch it, to really maybe understand the significance of it.
There you go. A bit of homework, everybody, for you to go away with. We will be back next week, though, to preview Money in the Bank. We'll be talking about WWE's greatest tag teams and what we think of the top 5. We'll be going through that next week, so we hope you enjoy it. And Finn, I'm sure you will also, along with me, encourage people to check out Inside the Ropes magazine. You can go to InsideTheRopesMagazine.com or pick up in W.H. Smith. Issue 11 is now for pre-Cody on the cover, and a 2-page Finn Q&A, what's going down from the top, loads of good stuff for people to get involved with.
Absolutely, and your interview with Cody, Kenny.
Yeah, 6-pager. He doesn't really hold back. He talks about some mistakes. We talk about that ending at Revolution. We talk about that awful Dark Order segment at the end of December 2019. So yeah, he answers some tough questions. I think people are going to enjoy it. So do check it out, and we appreciate all of you who have subscribed or picked up a copy. It means a lot to us. So. Finn, I will look forward to speaking to you. I know you're going away this weekend, so I hope you have a nice time.
Yes,
wherever you go.
Yeah, going up into the North Lakes in beautiful Cumbria. So,
Mr. Nature.
Yes, that's it. I'm going to absolutely. Yes, I'm looking forward to. Hopefully, the weather will be kind to us.
Keeping everything crossed for you. So we hope that the weather is kind to you wherever you are, everybody. Thank you for watching itrwrestling.com or for listening wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching or listening, and we'll talk to you soon.